Good evening, everybody. I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker for the evening. And in addition to being a fascinating personality, I think you'll find that his grasp of local history and certainly circus history is astounding. Scott O'Donnell has been a clown, an animal trainer, a ringmaster, a magician, and now a director of a major museum. He was a performer on the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey show. He was a talent scout for that show. Scott and I worked together on the Big Apple Circus for several years. And he's worked on just about every other show, large and small, in the country, this country and Canada as well. He's been here in Baraboo for 10 years as the director of the Circus World Museum, Mr. Scott O'Donnell.
Okay, let's get this. Good evening, everybody. So as Don mentioned, the smoke outside is not the only thing from Canada. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you this evening. I tell you in advance because my oots and the boots will give me away. I have DA'd myself long ago, thankfully, so you won't have to suffer through that. It's been, we think, 5 years since I had the pleasure to stand before all of you. So some of this you might have heard, and if you did, enjoy your dessert. If not, maybe it'll seem fresh again after 5 years. And hopefully some new facts and some stories along the way. So as Don mentioned, I've had the great honor and blessing of being the majority of my life in this wonderful business and art form of the circus. I was not born into the circus like so many of my friends and colleagues have been. I'm not a ninth generation elephant trainer or a seventh generation human cannonballer. I was the quirky kid from Canada. Yes, I will own that because I definitely couldn't play hockey. All the stuff that you're supposed to do. I was the pain in the butt kid that wanted to go to any circus that came within about 300, I'll say kilometers because we were in the metric system, but 300 miles from my hometown. I predate the creepy clown phenomenon that has overtaken the world. Thank you, Stephen King. I thought to make people laugh and get paid for it would be the best job in the entire world. And it was, for sure, and still is to this day. But I was from Canada, so I couldn't get into clown college because there was this pesky little thing called immigration. So I befriended clowns that came around my home country and said, please teach me the finer art of clowning, because there really is an art to clowning, as Mr. Teggy will contend, another fellow clown, historian. We have a lot of similarities as I was listening to our dais there today. And they graciously took me under their wing and taught me about clowning. But in the interim, I was a voracious reader about all things circus. And as I read so many books, spoke about this town that as a tender youth up in Canada, I surely could not pronounce. I called it Baraboo. And I kept telling my family, I got to get to Baraboo. And being Canadians, they thought it was an island. And they were like, great, let's all go to Baraboo. Until they have come to understand that it's sort of a landlocked Midwestern town. But all things through this wonderful place called Baraboo, Wisconsin, and Wisconsin in general. So I went to college, got a degree in Russian history, a political science and psychology minor, and ran away and joined the circus. So it can still happen. And it should still happen because there's so many delightful memories and journeys and opportunities to still explore in this art form called the circus. So 1793 is a pretty special year for this art form called the circus, because it's the first time that circus arrives on the fledgling shores of our great nation. It corresponds to the oldest artifact in our collection at Circus World, which is the very first newspaper ad for the Ricketts Circus in Philadelphia in 1793. It shows up and people are like, what is this thing called a circus? It's an import, if you will, from across the pond. And it's not an itinerant art form. It's sort of a more purpose-built in its fledgling years. And our president at the time, George Washington, comes to the circus and views it and says, boy, this is pretty nifty. I kind of like it. And thankfully he did. And thankfully from that day forward, from 1793, this blessed art form and institution has been part of the American experience. When you think about it, that's longer than Coca-Cola, Kentucky Derby, and baseball. All of these pillars that are part of the American experience, right? Circus beats them all. So circus starts 1793, and then I think another key date that's sort of important is 1825 in New York City. The very first circus gets put under a big top tent. And that's an important transition point to this lovely art form, because now it becomes an itinerant art form. It doesn't have to be a purpose-built building. Now it can come to your hometown, and it does. From that point all the way to this current day. Drives me crazy, bristles my 2 hairs that are left on my head when I hear guests come into Circus World, and probably any lot across North America, and they say, circus isn't what it used to be, or there's not that many circuses still out there. And it's always our pleasure to inform them that there's still 50-plus active circuses of all different shapes and sizes that are touring North America at this very time. They might look different. Some might be in a high school gym. Some might be in your local theater or performing arts center. And still, some might be under a big top tent pitched in the Lions field or the baseball field in your hometown. And, of course, arenas as well. So circus is still pretty alive. Yes, it's different. Yes, it's changed. Yes, it continues to change, because even at Circus World, this is a bittersweet year for us. Never thought, in my lifetime at least, we'd find ourselves at the last year of having performing elephants as part of our family. I'd say every single day down at Circus World, we celebrate that legacy, but we get all puddled up all the time because they're just part of the DNA of our family. They're the matriarchs of our family. But biology is not so kind. Just like elephants, like human beings, years roll along and you find yourself faced with a stock of circus elephants that are all of tender age, with no next generation of circus elephant waiting in the wings. So we celebrate their legacy. That legacy in the town of Baraboo, called Baraboo, dates back to 1888. That's when the Ringling Brothers acquired their first 2 elephants in Baraboo, and of course their herds grew from there. And also the Golmer brothers with their herd of elephants, and the Deppy family later on in Baraboo with their elephants at Circus World. So elephants have been part of this community for a long time. So just to tell you why you've spent the day at Circus World, and hopefully you had a great time with us. Why are we there? Well, we just turned 64 years young on July 1st, because July 1st, 1959, we opened our doors to become the 4th state historic site for the state of Wisconsin, celebrating the over 100 circuses that have come from this state, including the very first one to visit the circus, which happens in the area that we now know as Racine, Wisconsin. But that was in 1843, the Samuel H. Nichols Circus plays this area before Wisconsin's even a state. Wisconsin has its first circus, its resident circus, the Mabee Brothers Circus, which starts in Delavan, Wisconsin, a full year before Wisconsin achieved statehood. for many years, there was great debate about where Circus World was going to be. Was it going to be in Delavan, Wisconsin, or was it going to be in Baraboo, Wisconsin? Because Delavan has many more circuses that came from its storied community than Baraboo does. But Baraboo had a couple of things going in its favor for Circus World to get chosen as the site for Circus World Museum. One was the still existence of the Ringling Brothers Winter Quarter buildings. They were still there. They weren't being used as circus buildings anymore. One was a chick hatchery, one was Fulmer Transportation Company, and there was different repurposes of the buildings, but they were still along Water Street, so there was still an opportunity to celebrate that important piece of American history. Second of all, of course, it's the hometown of the Ringling Brothers, arguably the largest and most recognizable name to this very day for an American circus worldwide. As Don mentioned, I had the great pleasure in my career of traveling the world booking talent alongside a good friend, mentor, and colleague by the name of Tim Holst. And I think back to we had the opportunity to go on a 2-day camel caravan to the outer Mongolian mountains because we had heard that there was yak-back riders there. And because at the time there was the resources to do it, off we went. Let me tell you, as I go to the chiropractor twice a week, it's probably because of those 2 days on a camel trekking into the outer Mongolian mountains, but we got there. And before I went to Ringling, I had had the pleasure to be here at Circus World Museum as a performer for a couple of years. And I always said, you know, when you spend your life on the road, this was the first place that felt like home. So when we got to the village in the outer Mongolian mountains and they asked Tim Holst, where are you from? And he was able to respond, Salt Lake City, Utah is my hometown. And they turned to me. They had no clue what he said. And they looked at me and they nodded to me and I said, Baraboo. And they went, oh, Baraboo. In the Mongolian mountains. It didn't matter where we went. We went to Qiqihar, China, up on the Siberian border. They knew Baraboo. They could barely say it, but they knew it. Amazing. So the Ringling Brothers, their legacy, known the world over, put Baraboo on the map. The third factor that arguably was a deciding factor outside of so many passionate people in the Baraboo community that championed, there was another gentleman who at the tender age of 93 years young felt that this circus museum needed to be founded, not only to honor the Ringlings, but the circus heritage of this state. His name was John M. Kelly. And he was the personal attorney of the Ringling Brothers, what in our business we would call the fixer. He would go in and solve all the problems for the Ringlings. An amazing orator, Atticus Finch incarnate. We have a video playing of his oral history in the Feld building, and if you didn't get a chance to see it today, next time maybe give it a listen, because the way he talks, I feel like you give him your car keys, your home key, your bank account, like an amazing public speaker and so passionate. So Circus World opens on July 1st, 1959. Of course, the Ringling Brothers opened their circus. I keep calling them the Ringlings because that's how we know them. Their real last name was Rungling when they were German immigrants to this great nation. They came to Canada first, then from Canada to McGregor, Iowa, and then from McGregor, Iowa to this lovely community called Baraboo because it was being formed and it was agrarian times, so they needed a harness maker because horse-drawn wagons were the mode of transportation and Papa Ringling was a harness maker, so that's what brings them to town. And those 5 brothers, boy, they had the itch. In particular, Al Ringling, he's the one that I feel has the most grounded showbiz bug. That sawdust in your veins, we're going to do this. And he sort of brings the other brothers along. And of course, during that journey, they become impresarios unlike the world has ever known. And boy, are we blessed with that legacy. And all of you today get to be an important chapter of that legacy. what I always say that the early founders of the circus did, particularly the Ringling Brothers, and of course I should not leave out P.T. Barnum, who started his circus here in the great state of Wisconsin as well, and a lovely other town called Delavan, and of course James A. Bailey. But those gentlemen assembled the world and brought it to your hometown, and what a glorious day that was. Like a national holiday. Schools were let out, businesses closed down for the day. It was circus day in town. And so much of the first taste of the circus, unless you get up at the crack of dawn to watch the train unload, which was a spectacle unto itself, was the street parade that preceded the circus, the Pied Piper effect, if you will, which featured musicians such as yourself. Circus has always been a sensory experience. It's the sights and the sounds and the smells and the tastes that really made it what it was and what it still is. It still connects with people. You know, we're not unlike every place in America. I watch people walk in our doors, and the kids walk in and they're like, "What are we here to see?" They don't know what the circus is because it maybe hasn't come to their hometown yet. And even if it did, their face was stuck in this, and they didn't know that it was in their hometown. But something really cool happens. When they leave, this device is nowhere in sight. And their face is painted, and they got some dry cotton candy stuck to their cheek. And they're like, "This was so cool. When can we come back?" And it's so great because their grandparents and their parents had the biggest smile on their face because it's like, yeah, that's what it was when we were a kid. It was our Barney, our Wiggles, our Pepper Pig, our Paw Patrol, whatever the latest thing is in society for kids. The circus was that for generations before it. So the formula still works when kids come to see us, and that's pretty amazing. Now, of course, I'd be remiss if we're talking about big shifts in circus history if I didn't talk about a group of fellow countrymen of myself, some street performers from Quebec. And I love this story because my predecessor, Greg Parkinson, who was a longtime director at Circus World Museum and one of our longtime board members and historians, Fred Fenning, loved telling this story. So in the mid-'80s, there was this group of French Canadians that showed up on the lot in Milwaukee for the Great Circus Parade. And they didn't have enough money for hotel rooms, but they had a vision. And they had some books with some artistic drawings. And they walked around, and I love Fred Fenning will say, he asked them, "What are you trying to do, shrine dates?" And they were like, "No, we have a vision." So they were trying to figure out how the historical elements of the circus worked, while incorporating that with their new vision of what circus could be or what they thought it could be. Again, they didn't have enough money, so our leadership allowed them to sleep inside some of those glorious wagons. They put some hay bales down and they slept there, and they were voracious. They watched all the proceedings of the parade. And they thanked everybody for their generosity, and they left. Nobody knew what the heck if they'd see them ever again. Well, and a couple months later in Quebec City in 1984, Cirque du Soleil had their first performance. And of course, they've changed the circus industry and the art form in the ways that they have. I always say the Ringling Brothers assembled the world and brought that to your hometown. Cirque du Soleil created a world and invited you in. Little different take on the art form. But there's room for all of us. I mean, that's what's beautiful about this art form, is it's ever-changing, ever-evolving. You know, some of the first attractions in the circus were electricity, recorded sound, moving images, flying machines, which we now know as airplanes, automobiles, working with the Carrier family to create air conditioning. All comes to America through the circus. I see we're in a never-ending political landscape these days, I feel like. And there's a lovely term that still exists called throwing your hat in the ring. debate back and forth of whether this is the origin, but I'm going to claim it for the circus for sure. So of course, before there was advertising, you couldn't get it in the radio, there was not newspapers. How did you go do a political speech in front of thousands of people? Circus, right? Nice circus ring, take your hat off, throw it in the ring, signal to the ringmaster you want to give a little speech before the show, throw in your hat in the ring. There's a business term that still exists called making the nut. I always love telling our business leaders about this, and I bring this little gem along with me to prove the point. So of course, circus was an itinerant art form. It went by horse-drawn wagons to your town, right? So as it pulled into town, and they would order lots of hay and fuel oil and lots of supplies, well, the local sheriffs were a little worried about whether your bills would be paid, so they came out and they took the nuts off of all the wagon wheels. And only when you had paid all your bills did you get your nuts back, which allowed you to leave town. So you make the nut, right? Yeah. Jumbo anything, jumbo jets, jumbotrons, jumbo-sized drinks at 7-Eleven. Thank you, P.T. Barnum, for creating this lovely term called jumbo for the largest land mammal that ever had been shared with audiences in North America and around the world, Jumbo the elephant. So it's so interesting to see how circus continues to navigate its way in and out of this fabulous American experience that we find ourselves blessed to be part of. I always wonder, everybody's like, what's coming next? Or what's your favorite show out of all the shows you've worked on and all the shows you've visited and all the shows you've seen around the world? I share this common thing with Mr. Feld, who owns Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. His answer and my answer always is, the next one. That's my favorite show, right? It's still being dreamt. It's still being conceived. It's still entertaining children of all ages. I watched today in the Big Top Tent. Same thing. Kids came in. What are we here to say? What's a windjammer? What does that mean? Are they got kites? I heard a kid say that today. Do they do kites? Do they? Walked in having no clue what was going on, sat there transfixed afterwards and listened to the kid as he left the Big Top and said, do they have tapes? Can we find them? Are they on YouTube? That's pretty awesome. Each and every one of you has that impact because of your passion and your skills of still continuing on the amazing legacy of circus music. It must never die. It cannot ever die. Thank you for all that you do to continue to inspire wide-eyed children of all ages about the power of music, the transformative power of music, particularly circus music. I contend that there's, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, I'm sure, nothing like it. If you can play a circus tune, bow down. I came in tonight, I couldn't believe you guys were still playing. Your chops have to be like numb. I don't know how you're doing it, but God bless you for doing it. Oh my gosh. Keep doing it. Keep inspiring. Find a youngster. I guarantee you, they might look at you strange. What the heck's a euphonium? A tuba, a piccolo? What the heck is that? They'll be transfixed, I promise you. Find a kid, talk to them, show them what it is. Because I want to be here in like another 40 years and talk to just as many circus windjammers. And you guys can make that happen as you were doing, as I saw you do today, impactfully, beautiful, warms my heart and my soul for sure. Other than that, I feel like I've babbled and you're all super tired and full and maybe want to go to the slot machines. And I don't blame you. And they can be pretty generous here with their slot machines. I only know that because our elephant trainer just won $600 here the other night. on a quarter slot machine and had the wherewithal to say thank you and walked out the door. Circus, right? Yeah, I got it. Gone. Anyway, I just want to open the floor to any questions that anybody might have. Let me tell you as well, as long as I got you, where we're going at Circus World, or what our attempt is to be. So we have always been owned by the state of Wisconsin, as you learned, from day one. For 60 years from day one on, we were managed, operated, the collections were grown, the holdings at Circus World were grown by a private nonprofit foundation called Circus World Museum Foundation. At least that's what they were called in 2022 when they ceased operation. 5 years ago, we fully came into the state system. All of us became state employees. I contend we are the only state in the nation that has ringmasters, clowns, elephant trainers, officially, on the payroll. And it's quite fun, I gotta tell you, when you're on the phone with state risk management, and they say, now when you say elephant, are you talking about a little fuzzy one in the gift shop? And we're like, yeah, and? Everything we do is an and. It's just so bizarre. Let us get this straight. You're gonna put a willing human being into a cannon, and you're gonna shoot them through the air. Yes, sir, twice on Saturday. So it's interesting conversations, as you might expect. But as a result of being part of the state system, it also affords us some great assets that likely another private circus would not have access to. So we are beginning our master planning for Circus World as far as what does the next 64 years look like at Circus World. And we got a few exciting things on the horizon. One is a year-round circus school to be on our grounds. Not only the circus arts, we're looking at it a little bigger than that. Circus performance, of course, and that's human and animal. How do you get to be a goat trainer? How do you train a horse? How do you do all that? We want to have a place for that. How do you be a circus technician with lights and sound? And how do you put butts in seats? Because that's really important. Teaching those things. And music. We want music to be part of that experience as well. So as round a complete circle of all things that touch the circus, that's our goal. Secondly is a year-round circus performance building, purpose-built for the circus arts. Up until now, we've been a seasonal operation because we've been under a classic big top tent. It's a little tough in February to have a big top. We did it at the Big Apple Circus. We sure did. But a purpose-built building. The paradigm up here of the Dells has changed. Gone are the years when it was just Memorial Day to Labor Day and everybody just came in that window. Now they have what we call the cruise ships. They have the Kalaharis and the Great Wolves. And you check in on Friday and you leave on Sunday, and they don't want you to leave their perimeter. But it's migrated people, and I get it. Why not go in the lazy river in February? That's probably a better experience than in July. The Dells BCB is really good, Visitor and Convention Bureau, at moving their audience, and now they see more visitors during the shoulder seasons than they saw just during the summer months. So we're missing a lot of eyeballs, opportunities, and engagement on the circus arts. So that's our goal, to have a year-round performance building so we can do Circus 365. Maybe we'll take a couple of days off. And a brand new circus wagon pavilion, built from the ground up with proper curatorial controls for arguably the signature part of our collection. Nothing like it. We have over 265 wagons in our collection, which represent, conservatively, probably in the 80 percentile range of wagons that still exist, but arguably probably about only 3% of circus wagons that were ever built. Tragically, there's lots of photos, Tim likely has them in his collection, of fields of wagons being burnt during the war to get the metal off of the wagons to contribute to wartime efforts and other reasons. So they're just gone to the ages. So having a building that is purpose-built from the ground up with proper curatorial controls in a more immersive environment so guests can learn more about the wagons through interactive kiosks and all kinds of modern technology, which changes by the day. Probably as I stand here, something new has popped up, some AI version of me, someplace in the world, I'm sure. But you can't get an AI version of the circus. I mean, you could get a CGI, but it's not the same. We've all seen a circus movie, and they're glorious, and they connect, but there's nothing that can compare sitting within 50 feet of a circus performer to see that bead of sweat go. Hopefully that the bow and arrow in his feet as it comes around goes in the right direction. All right? It's not CGI. It's not going to off and, oh boy, that was close. Now it's the real deal, right? Nothing can compare with the smell of animals as they come around and their presence. So it's always got to be live. It's better live. So that's our commitment to that. And of course, many other things will probably come to be as well at Circus World. So big things on the horizon. Being part of the state system puts you in to the state legislature coffers, I guess is what I would say. So all of our bosses are all of the citizens of the state of Wisconsin. They're our bosses, and we listen to them. And we'll be doing listening sessions with them as well, and I'm sure reaching out to many of you likely during that process as far as what's your visions, what should the next chapter of Circus World be like. So stay tuned for more on that. I've prattled. Any questions from anybody? Yes! I don't have the winning Mega Million numbers, I am sorry.
What are your plans for the Al Ringling Theater?
Oh, what a beautiful question. Speaking of Mega Millions, we are actively in discussions and negotiations for hopefully adding the Al Ringling Theater to the holdings of Circus World. It will allow us to become a year-round operation sooner than building our year-round purpose-built building. It will allow for sustainability of that structure well into the future. It brings the assets of the state of Wisconsin to that structure. Boilers, the state does all day long. Asbestos removal, they do all day long. Terracotta doesn't scare them, comes at big price points, but that can be managed within the state system. Preserving the legacy of the Ringlings, of which the Al Ringling Theater is a vital part of that legacy, both regionally and, of course, within the confines of Circus Baraboo, Wisconsin, but also the world. That's our goal. Our goal is to bring stability to that beautiful venue, program it, bring it back to its potential. I feel like anytime any of us are in it, the building is screaming to go. It doesn't want to be the Al Ringling Mausoleum. It wants to be the Al Ringling Theater. So that's our goal. Yes? That's a great question. So when we fully came into the state system 5 years ago, up until then, we were the only state site that was receiving no state support. So everything that came in was paid for by cotton candy and face painting and the snow cones and all those good stuff. But we kept raising our hand because, of course, operation of our scale and our potential needs more support. So now we get it depends on each budget cycle, but currently we're at about just shy of $700,000 annually that we get in GPR funds. That's general purpose revenue funds, i.e. taxpayer dollars, that comes to us. For comparison, one of our sister sites, which is Old World, Wisconsin, even though we're still the most visited site for the state and we gross the most amount for the state, they've been officially part of the state system longer than us, so they get almost $2 million a year in GPR funding. And that's why they have 40 permanent staff and we have 7 currently. So we keep plugging away on it for sure to get some circus equality. We never say no. Definitely, we have ongoing conversations with Mr. Gorman, the current owner of the Twin Hemi. It's a beautiful piece. We were honored to have it with us for so many years and do the restoration work that we did on it. So if the opportunity arises, we would definitely entertain that for sure. Anything's possible other than me getting a perm. The ship has sailed on that, unfortunately. Yes?
Are the elephants going to California?
No, they are not. That's a great question. So the elephants, their last day with us is August 27th. That's the last day of our performance season. Then they have a few more contractual dates with the Jody Jordan Circus, and from there they head back to Hugo, Oklahoma, where they are from, to the Endangered Ark Foundation, which is the charitable wing of Carson and Barnes Circus Empire. The rest of their retired herd mates are there. There's 16 of them that are already there, including the second oldest elephant in the United States in North America, Susie, who's 77 years young. So Viola and Kelly will be headed off there. It's been their home when they haven't been touring, so it's familiar property, a couple hundred acres for them to explore. If you ever get the opportunity, go. I recommend it. They have great Airbnb cabins that you can go and stay in overnight, and the elephants bring your breakfast to you in a basket in the morning to the front of your cabin. You can get on a hay wagon and go out in the fields and see them just being beautiful, majestic elephants. So if you get an opportunity, please do. It also, I'm always remiss, I have to give a plug out as well to a wonderful tiger trainer who is with us for so many years, Ryan Easley with Show Me Tigers. He's also from Hugo, Oklahoma. And during the times of COVID, he stopped touring and built his own preserve called Growler Pines, where you can go and see his retired circus tigers there. So you can see elephants and tigers, and it is wall-to-wall circus in Hugo. If you've never been, make the pilgrimage. It's absolutely worth it. The Showman's Rest alone is so impactful in Hugo, Oklahoma. So maybe a future one of these meets should be in Hugo, Oklahoma. I would encourage you to do that. The town would be mighty, mighty proud to have you all there. Any other? Yes, sir.
Where are you from specifically?
That's a good question. I am from a town called Barrie, Ontario, Canada, which is about an hour north of Toronto. Any other questions from anybody? So thank you for inviting me this evening. Thank you for spending time with us at Circus World today. Thank you for coming to the Baraboo community. It was so funny to listen. I know I'm going back again. On the radio before your concert on the Square performance, they were informing everybody what the term Windjammers meant. Because again, in the community, everybody was like, what's a Windjammer? The town now knows solidly what Windjammers are. I have heard so much beautiful feedback from your beautiful concert, both at the Al Ringling Theater and, of course, at Circus World today. Thank you for keeping circus music alive. Do it to your last breath, if you can, as we will continue to honor the circus arts till our last breaths. It must always continue. It must always be the greatest show on earth. Thank you, everybody.